Orruk Warclans. Now, this was kind of a tough vid to conceptualize, as the community received the book from various sources, one of which was Honest Wargamer. Thank you, Rob, for actually previewing the book. A lot of us were pretty, and by us I meant like the orc community, we're pretty disappointed, genuinely disappointed. And today we're going to deep dive, well, deep dive might be a little strong. Today I'm going to dive into, shallowly, into Ironjawz. So this will be a 2-video thing. I'm going to do Cruel Boys a little bit later, so we'll do another video separate from this one. But I want to first off say that the TLDR is, I'm not happy with the book. It's from a big scope perspective, the book is disappointing in many ways. That has nothing to do with the change of style of play. I'm completely cool with the change, to be honest. As a guy who loves control, and for those who haven't understand that terminology, I'm using magic terms now. I'm an aggro control guy, and the fact that they added more control elements to Ironjawz actually gets me a bit excited. I love that kind of concept of controlling play, disrupting moves from your opponent. I think that's an exciting area to experience. What is not exciting is the design approach to the actual book itself. And what I mean by that is this is pretty much a regurgitation of the actual index. This isn't shocking news. If you've seen any of the reviews, we're all saying the same thing, and that is exceedingly disappointing. The faction wasn't positioned great to the meta to begin with, and this didn't improve upon it. We will be talking positives, so this isn't a completely just downplaying the book. I am going to be talking positives because I am excited about elements of the book and of the army. And we will be talking about that, but I'm just going to lead off with some of the negatives. And the negatives is it's just a recycling of the book. When you're charging this much money from the book, wherever you are in the world, I don't know exactly. In Canadian dollars, it's 70 bucks. Americans, probably 60 some odd. In British pounds, I don't know, 5 pounds. I don't know. I don't know what it is in actual British currency. But when you're charging a premium, expectations should be fairly high from the customers. And this doesn't meet that. You don't take a faction that is kind of struggling in the meta and then make it worse. That's a brave route to take, but it's not the right route. And it almost was a little difficult to say it, but our book sucks. And in the large scheme of things of Earth, considering, you know, wars and poverty and inflation, and in the large scope of things, this is a nothing. In fact, my store is a nothing, really. All I sell is wants. I don't sell any needs. There's no milk, there's no bread, there's no meat that I sell in the shop. So this is really a nothing thing. But the nice thing about hobbies is they're safe harbors to kind of escape some of those harsh realities. And that's where this really kind of hits home a little bit, because not everyone who is into this hobby has multiple armies that they could pivot to. There are people in the world that only have one army, or this forms one of two. And to have their little safe harbor just be kind of blown up really is demoralizing. And that's what I really mean about it. Like if the purpose of the book is to inspire, to obviously push sales, of course, I am I don't think the book nailed it. Inspirationally, it just feels the same as it was before. So none of the complaints from before were really addressed in the book. And of course they weren't. Why? Well, the book was printed 9, 10, 11, 12 months ago. I was literally having a conversation back in November. I actually looked up the text, and I had a buddy, we were talking about orcs, and he's like, but the codex is coming out, and that should change things. And I'm like, I'm sorry to break it to you. Back in November, I said the book was probably written 8, 9 months ago. The odds of the person who wrote the index all of a sudden getting an epiphany all on their own to now change course or to improve on some of those mistakes, where I said next to zero. And unfortunately, I was correct. This is not a thing I was really wanting to be right on, but it was actually a little bit worse than I thought, because they actually took away abilities. But they also, to their defense, added a few really, really cool things. All right, so that's the negatives. So enough about that. I'm letting go of that now. Let's talk about some of the positives. Well, first off, Gaio, if you look at the table here, I got my Ironjawz collection. Now, this is all, the entire collection I have, warts and all. You'll notice that a fair chunk of it is painted, and of course, like every other wargamer, well, we also have stuff that is not painted. In here is new and older models, but one of the most wonderful things about Ironjawz is the aesthetic. I mean, you got to be into it. I love the crudeness. I love the bashed and dented in metal. I really, really love the look of Ironjawz. The model team nailed it, and everything about Ironjawz I truly, truly do love. Which is why my Ironjawz collection is fairly large. And you could tell by what's on here, there's been a couple of false starts. Like, for instance, I own 30 brutes, but I don't have all 30 brutes painted. They're close. I only have basically 10 brutes painted. And then the rest are kind of false starts where I was like, oh man, this time will be different. I'll paint up all these guys, and they'll be so good in the next edition. And of course, they weren't. And we'll talk about that as we go into this edition of Ironjawz. All right, so let's start off with, I guess, the actual battle traits. Yeah, let's talk about the War Scroll update. Now, in that War Scroll update is where the magic kind of happens. We're going to talk about two things. We're going to be talking about Field Sergeant, and we're going to be talking about Prize Beast. These were two huge things that impacted Ironjawz. Again, this isn't going to be a newsflash to anyone, but these are new Honor Guard options for this season, and I hope they don't go away anytime soon. First is Field Sergeant, which you take a hero that's in the General's Regiment, and they assume the role of Field Sergeant. And what they do is units wholly within 12 of them get an additional 2 inches to the move. This is absolutely gangbusters for Ironjawz. Ironjawz is an incredibly slow army, generally speaking. All their infantry move 4 whole entire inches. They do get a little bit of perks, and we'll talk about that in a second in the version of Mighty Destroyers. But that slow movement for an army that only operates in basically one phase of the game, which is the fighting phase, the combination of those two things really hurts. But getting an additional 2 inches of move doesn't sound like a lot, but is actually quite extraordinary. Think about it this way. If after I move 4 inches towards you, I still have a 9-inch charge. If all of a sudden I could get within 6 and make it a 7-inch charge, that is a huge shift in odds. So any inches of movement is really impactful. And combining that with their battle traits, it helps an enormous amount, is what I'm going to say. So now let's look at Prized Beast. Now, Prized Beast, the second big thing that is going to impact our armies, is taking a monster, a non-unique hero monster, or non-unique hero, yeah, I said that right, that's in the general's detachment or regiment. It gets a +1 to hit to all its profiles. And most importantly, it includes their companion profiles. This is also really quite huge. We have access to a lot of really cool monsters, and they are basically all the big pigs. All the Maw-gruntas are monsters. So anything you nest within your general's regiment will get that additional +1. And holy cow, does that really amp up the hitting power of that war scroll. When you're talking probabilities, because the entire game's probabilities are calculated on a D6, any -1 or +1 has big impact. So it really does impact the output of some of these monsters. So those are the 2 War Scroll updates. If you have not seen those, you can download them for free off the GW site. And it was an attempt for GW to bring certain factions back into the game. Now, it's important to note that this adjustment was not in addition, I shouldn't say, it was done after this book was already went to print. But those 2 things are what make Ironjawz much better, almost in spite of the book. Those 2 big adjustments, those 2 levers that they pulled, bring Ironjawz back into the actual conversation. All right, so that's the battle traits. Sorry, pardon me. That's the War Scroll update. Now we'll get into the battle traits. So Gaio, if you could get the battle traits up. The battle traits we're going to be talking about is Mighty Destroyers, and the Ironjawz Waaagh. Now, Mighty Destroyers is an incredible rule. Definitely, obviously, would be better if our units were faster. But again, we got that little bump in movement, which has big impact. So it makes Mighty Destroyers actually even better. So what does Mighty Destroyers do during any hero step, mine or your opponent's, yours or your opponent's? You get to pick a unit in your Ironjawz and move them 3 inches. And unlike the majority of the movements in the game, you're actually allowed to get into combat. And you're allowed to do this 3-inch movement even while engaged in combat. This is where the part of the magic starts happening with Ironjawz. Because you can do this on your opponent's turn, after they declare a battle tactic, if one of those units are part of their potential is unlocked if they charge, like for instance, they get +1 damage when they charge, and they're kind of close when they declare that, you can do a 3-inch move toward that unit, clip it, and deny that damage potential. If one of their battle tactics requires them to charge, you can do that 3-inch Mighty Destroyers move to, again, clip them and deny them the ability to charge. This is an exciting part of the army, and one that requires a lot of skill or experience when using. But it's definitely one of the control elements that Ironjawz have access to that is incredibly impactful. So although it doesn't sound great on paper, or it sounds okay on paper, this is actually quite tremendous once you're actually in combat or very close to the enemy. Because you can use those movements to control them and control their actions and control their options. it's almost like you close in on your opponent and then you start wrestling. And you start trying to do these lock moves on their actual units. And it's one of my favorite parts of the army currently right now, and I welcome it. Now let's talk about Ironjawz Waaagh. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting. The Ironjawz Waaagh stipulates it's once per battle, because this book was printed quite a while ago, or went to print quite a while ago. It went to print with the old rules. The studio has adjusted it so that you can now Waaagh every turn. Currently, well, I shouldn't say currently, but as we understand it, you can perform a Waaagh once with each character. Why? Because that's what it was worded that way. But the exciting part is that restriction has been removed. Now, whether this is intentional, we don't quite know, but let's assume that the Waaagh can be performed every hero phase. Sorry, your hero phase. Without that restriction to character, you could have one character Waaagh constantly. This is a quality of life improvement, is basically what I'm really excited about. Because you can have, all you now have to worry about is one character to position correctly, and then you could shield that one character, and it is much easier to manage that one character and positioning them right than having to then go one character Waaagh, now I have to run up this guy, and then now I'm gonna have to run up this guy on the next following turn. The biggest thing about Waaagh, if you don't know, is it adds +1 to your charge, and it adds +1 to the attack. Now, because it doesn't say companion weapons, folks, it does not affect the companion weapons of any of the models, but it does affect the non-companion weapons. +1 attack is a big deal. What's also important to note is that +1 attack is not hinging on that unit having to charge. That's another really cool thing. So although the +1 charge, I'm not gonna say is irrelevant in later stages of the game, once you kind of close in, everyone's kind of close to each other, and the +1 to charge becomes a little bit less impactful, but it's nice. It still smooths out the math, still gets you, odds are very good that you get in, right? So if you're 3 inches away from your opponent, when you Waaagh, snake eyes, does not matter, you still get in. Because if you roll 2 +1, you're 3 inches away is 3, obviously you make it in. But the big deal is the additional charge, the 1 inch additional charge. Sorry, the other part of the big deal. Now this interaction kind of gets really, really exciting with a war scroll we're going to be talking about later. That has been exciting quite a while. But well, let's talk about the top of the pyramid when it comes to destruction. And the top of the pyramid, when we talk about destruction, or in the first war scroll we're going to be chatting about, is Kragnos. Now, if you don't know how I feel about Kragnos from a model perspective, well, you know what? We're going to post a link on a video. I did do a review where I expressed my feelings about Kragnos as a model anyway. Right now, for all intents and purposes, for this video, we're just going to talk about him from the rules perspective. And from the rules perspective, the orange donkey is amazing. He basically shoulders the entire destruction faction, and his rules, what you pay for what you get, is just fantastic. I don't feel he's overpowered. I don't feel he's cheap. He doesn't automatically make every single one of my lists so far, but holy cow, is it close? Because 3d6 charge to everything within 12 inches of him on his really nice size base is a big, big deal. And if you're going Ironjawz and you're having an army that moves relatively slowly, that just got a little bit faster with those extra 2 inches, that all of a sudden now can charge an additional 3d6. Now you're looking at an army that gets across the table really, really fast. What I love about Kragnos as well is he hits hard. He isn't a genuine threat in combat. He's not something your opponent can ignore. Downside about Kragnos is he's not the most durable thing in existence. He's got a 4+ save, a 5+ ward, 18 wounds, if I'm not mistaken. Let's look at it. I got cards. Yeah, 18 wounds. Although not the most durable thing, he's not nothing. It does take some attention, but if he does get exposed to your opponent's main hammer, he will probably die in combat. So definitely not something that is indestructible, not oppressive, like for instance, Sons of Behemoth were when they first were released, where it's like they were next to impossible to kill. He's definitely not one of those. And at over 500 points, he's not something that doesn't detract from the army as well, because obviously he occupies so much space in the list. So no, I really like where Kragnos is at rules-wise. He's just perfect for Ironjawz, and for that matter, really, for almost any destruction army, because how do you not leverage 3d6 charge? All right, so Kragnos, absolutely incredible. But now let's talk about something truly exciting. And for the very first time, let's talk about, here, I'm gonna put him on the old turntable. Boom. Let's talk about Gordrakk. What? I think for the very first time, assuming the Waaagh works the way the community thinks, or we all think, because we all kind of arrived at the same conclusion, this guy becomes super, super cool. Now, why? Well, he moves fast enough, 10 inches, that's not nothing. He's hard to kill. He's 20 wounds with a base save of 3+. Not the hardest to kill because he doesn't have a ward save. So he's just relying on his wound count and his armor save. But you could opt to keep him out of combat. And one of the really, truly amazing things about Gordrakk is his version of a rule called the Voice of Gork. And the Voice of Gork, I thought at the beginning that the Voice of Gork was every single time he calls a Waaagh. But disappointingly, that's not really the case. It's a once per battle reaction. So this is only going to happen once. But when he calls the Waaagh, he simultaneously not only unlocks the Waaagh, which is +1 to charge and +1 to attack, everything also within 18 inches of him gets +1 to hit. That is absolutely fantastic. Now, he did that before. Why is it fantastic now? Mostly because of the fact that if he could constantly call a Waaagh every battle round, he becomes a very convenient spot to position for Ironjawz players, because he moves 10. And the fact that it's not that Waaagh now he has to call in another hero, he could just position himself. And, that makes him really useful. On top of that, he takes the thing that he did before, that when you time it right, +1 attack across 18 inches across a pie plate this big, when she gets to the center of the table, is a huge section of the table. So I've been actually putting Gordrakk in the vast majority of my lists. I am now experimenting with them. Is Kragnos maybe a better choice because it's the 3d6 charge? 3d6 charge is absolutely amazing. But I'll say it again, 3d6 charge in the latter turns of the game becomes a bit less impactful. I'm not going to say it's useless, because that's not the case. But being able to call a Waaagh off a guy that's substantially less points, because currently right now Gordrakk is, I believe, around 380 points. I think just shy of 400, as opposed to over 500 for Kragnos. You get the speed, that you're looking for. He does have some tech, and what do I mean by that? Is his main attacks are anti-hero and his Maw-krusha attacks are anti-monster. And currently in the current meta, there's a lot of heroic monsters kind of traipsing across the battlefield. So he serves a purpose there as well. So he brings to the table something that the army doesn't normally have access to, all in one neat package. I love the model. I love the way he looks. And I love what I did with some of the conversions as well. He's a model that's I've been wanting to use, and I'm excited to use again. And I think he's an incredibly, really good choice. So there it is. That's Gordrakk. What else are we going to talk about now? Now we're going to talk with the next thing. All right, let's get Gordrakk off the turntable. We now go into the regular Maw-krusha. All right, the regular Maw-krusha. Why take the regular Maw-krusha over Gordrakk? Why would you not always want access to the +1 when he was? Because when timed right, it could be absolutely devastating. This guy does not have that. But what he does bring to the table is some different tech that is also extremely appealing. First off, he's cheaper. So if you're squeezed for points, the extra points can help out. Well, there's an option for you. The other thing that's amazing about him is all the attacks, both from the rider and the Maw-krusha itself, are all anti-infantry. So if you don't have any brutes, which is a unit that Ironjawz has that is anti-infantry, you can actually go, hey, you know what, I didn't take any brutes, and I want to save points because maybe I want to go more of a horde style list. Maybe you wanted to take lots of Ardboys and then still have some anti-infantry tech that is fast and mobile hammer. You have the regular Maw-krusha. Now, you give him an Amber Bone, which is one of the artifacts that Ironjawz have access to. That rider can be hitting an infantry unit at -3 rend with 8 attacks. Now, granted, for whatever reason, the actual Mega Boss hits on 4s, which is disappointing for sure. Why is your hero hitting on 4s? Oh, it's because he's an orc, and orcs hit on 4s and wound on 3s. Okay, cool, but why doesn't everyone else's heroes get balanced that way? Why are elves, which normally hit on 3s, wound on 4s, why don't their heroes do that? No, their heroes hit on 3s and wound on 3s. They got the improvement because they're heroic. Why don't Ironjawz get that improvement? Aren't they just as heroic in their own way? No one knows, folks. As they say, it is what it is. But past that damage, the actual Maw-krusha does something I think quite exceptional. And this is called Destructive Bulk. Now, this is a rampage. And here's where things kind of get exciting. If this unit charges this turn, roll a d3. On a 2+, this unit can move 2d6 inches. It can pass through combat ranges of enemy units and can end that move in combat. Can, not must. Then pick an enemy unit that this unit passed across during that move. Inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to d3 roll. If that enemy unit is infantry, double the mortal wounds of the damage inflicted. Holy cow. This right here is just amazing. So picture this. You charge in with the Maw-krusha into an infantry unit. You 2d6. Let's just say you roll average. But that 7 inches clears it, because it's a 6-inch base, clears it so you land on the other side. And by landing on that other side, you actually get close to supporting heroes that are infantry. And maybe you clip them. Well, now they take mortal wounds. And now you could hollow out the support characters on the other side. Okay, that sounds pretty incredible. That's an enormous amount of movement. He just moved, charged, placed, and here's where things also get exciting. You can then power through and remove yourself out of that combat, because obviously everything that's around you, there's going to be one target that is going to be less wounds than you, and you could just leave. That's an incredible thing that specifically the mega boss on Maw-krusha can do, that Gordrakk cannot, and neither can Kragnos. So what's really interesting about all three of those heroes, they all bring some very interesting tech to Ironjawz. And although maybe the Maw-krusha wasn't something you were considering, I think he becomes a really neat piece. I'm not gonna lie, I wish he could be nested under another hero. That would have unlocked Prize Beast, and having a Mega Boss on Maw-krusha with Prize Beast would have been just, whew! And I'm guessing that's why they didn't want to do that. But I think he's actually pretty cool. Again, he's a guy who moves 10 inches. He's got a great base save of 3+. He doesn't have as many wounds as Kragnos. He's at 18 instead of 20. But because he can wall all the time, he can position well, and then continue to wall to support his army. And then while pushing with the rest of your army, kind of shielding him from combat, you could choose when to commit him. And then when you commit him, you could do all these incredible positional things with him, potentially, that is just really exciting. Because again, don't forget, you have Mighty Destroyers that can happen in both your opponents and your hero phases. So you could move 3, charge, right? Or move 3 in the hero phase, move again in the movement phase, charge. It's just an enormous amount of movement and angles you could get to. And I absolutely adore him. I think he's something I'm also going to experiment with. And again, it's not like his rules changed massively from the index. It was something that was there. He wasn't a popular choice, but I feel like the fact that I can wow with him every turn so that I could position him and then support the army and then have that point constantly wawing, I think is interesting. And it's kind of cool, right? That one little small adjustment, that potential adjustment, feels like you could unlock and use these characters in a different way. So that's exciting. At least that's exciting to me. I don't know about the rest of you. But there it is. This is my take on it, and what I'm currently jazzed about. All right, so let's get into the next few heroes. All right, so the next few heroes, these are more like detachment heroes, right, or regiment heroes. So we have Kragnos, we have Gordrakk, we have the actual Maw-krusha, regular mega boss Maw-krusha. The next big choice, and I'll go grab him. Where is he? There he is. I'll put him right on the turntable right there. Boom. The next big cool choice is the Weird Knob Shaman. Now, War Chanters used to be the thing I used to take all the time, and I ran a bunch of lists without any wizards at all. And why did I do that? I found them to be completely unreliable, and wizards were just something I really couldn't compete in that field, so I just opted not to take any. I actually didn't really feel the pinch. It felt fine not taking a wizard and not being able to compete at that in that field in the hero phase. Yes, they got to cast whatever they wanted to, if they got to cast it, because again, they have to roll anyway. But I couldn't stop the big magic dominant armies, so it wasn't a big deal for me. And War Chanters just felt better. Their prayers were more relevant to me. But that has changed. And that has changed in a very, very big way with the release of this book. Here's one of the big positives that this book brought to the table for Ironjawz tools, and that is the roles of manifestations. Now, before we get into the manifestations, we're going to stay focused on the actual Ironjawz Weird Knob for just a moment. The reason why he's such a great choice is he unlocks an additional power level if he's within, I believe, combat range. Actually, no, it's not even within combat range. Wholly within 12 inches of 10 or more orc models, he gets an additional power level. So he goes from a 1-cast wizard to a 2-cast wizard. Now keep that in mind when we start going into the other units. I'm sure you've heard of it already, but Ardboys are a great war scroll. We're gonna touch upon that. So the fact that the Ardboys are a great war scroll, you're gonna have access to that buff. Now, why is the Shaman so exceptionally good? All right, now I'm gonna show you some of the unpainted stuff. You're gonna have to forgive me, folks, but we just got these models in because they arrived late here in my shop due to Memphis having a snowstorm. But we're gonna first start off with this Endless Spell. Now this Endless Spell is actually where the magic sauce is. This is the reason to take your Shaman. This Endless Spell is called the Gore-grunta. And the Gore-grunta, if you could get those rules up on the screen, Gaio, the Gore-grunta is just where the magic happens. It's cast on a 5. You place it, and when you place it, you basically pick whether you want to add 1 or 2 to your casting roll. So you're going to pick cast +2. You're then going to roll, for every +1 you picked, you're going to roll a die. And if any of those dice end up being a 1 or a 2, you take mortal wounds. Now, yes, you take mortal wounds. I just want to get the info so I say it right. Yes, you take mortal wounds, but heck, you get +2 to cast. +2 to cast. That is just absolutely fantastic. Now, we set up the Shaman so that he's wholly within 12 inches of a unit of 10 or more. Well, you're going to cast the Aurora first. All you need is a 5. So pretty good odds of you casting it. Assuming you get it off and it goes through, it doesn't get unbound, you now can cast your second spell. And the second spell you're going to want to cast is Foot of Gork. So I'm going to remove this off of the actual turntable right now. Here's Foot of Gork. Nothing too terribly exciting because all I have it is primed. This spell is just absolutely fantastic and now leans hard into the theme that the designers were going for, which is control. And the control of the Foot of Gork is you place the actual unit, these kind of slinky, or one hops on to the other. So you don't get to move both, you get to move one of them. And that one has to land within 9 inches. I don't believe it's wholly. No, it does. It does. Has to be wholly within 9 inches of the other piece. But when you place it, you pick, I believe, yeah, each enemy unit within 3 inches. Now I'm going to fast track this to the thing that really, really matters. It does 1 of 3 effects, but the one that you're really going to want to know is it does D3 mortal wounds, right? Roll a D3 for each enemy unit. Sorry, you can inflict mortal wounds equivalent to the roll, okay, or, oh, sorry, pardon me. Then roll D3 for each enemy unit within 3 inches. On a 2+, you inflict the mortal wounds to that unit. The unit gains the stomp keyword, and because it has the stomp keyword, it minuses 1 die from their charge roll. So instead of rolling 2 dice, they roll 1 dice. This is absolutely fantastic. The Shaman has an extraordinary amount of impact on the Ironjawz army. This is a cool technical piece. And though for those of you that are new to the game, it doesn't sound like a lot, it is an actual massive effect on your opponent's army. Detracting that 1 does this. Let's just say your opponent stops 3 inches away because they have to. You then redeploy. If you redeploy just 2 inches, just roll a 2 on that redeploy. If they're subtracting 1 from their die, they have to roll a 5 or a 6 to complete that charge. And they're only 5 inches away from you, needing to roll a 5 or a 6 to complete the charge. If they don't, they fail it. That is absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely adore the Shaman. If you haven't already figured that out, I'm going to take these unpainted endless spells. Really looking forward to actually painting these. Like I said, I just got these just a couple days ago. These endless spells are just absolutely fantastic. I'm just going to drop the other spell, which is also really, really great. Nothing really much to see. I didn't put all the little bits of, I'm going to call garbage around it. I kind of just like it as a pool with an arm sticking out. The Mork Spit Marsh is, again, absolutely fantastic. Its effect is subtract 3 from the control scores of units that are within 6 inches of it. Because of the length of the actual piece itself, you could conceptually actually clip 2 objectives or 2 units on objectives and subtract 3 from their scores. Probably the biggest, coolest part about this actual model itself is the size of it. You can deny movement or denies our units from actually placing within. So what do I mean by that? Well, you take the unit and you figure out how far they can move and then place that endless spell in that spot. So now they have to shorten their move. Yes, if they have enough movement, they can pass through it. But because it is a model, they can't be on it. And that's where I think that really shines. It's just another bit of control, another little fly in the ointment for your opponent. And again, another piece of control that expands on the theme that the designers were aiming for Ironjawz, as this aggressive control army. Whether that's your vibe or not, I don't know. I truly like it. I don't think I ever pick another manifestation lore. I think the design team hit it out of the park on this. So this is a big positive that gets introduced, I think, into the actual army. And yeah, I don't think I ever take Morbid Conjuration over this. The guy, I'm going to put the actual Shaman back on the pedestal. The Shaman to me now becomes an absolute must-have in the army, simply because once you cast the Roar Endless spell, he becomes so tremendously good. Getting that +2 to cast allows you to, well, you could cast the Roar and then get a +2 to cast for a Hand of Gork, which is also quite tremendous, teleporting a unit late game to basically an objective that, say, your opponent has left uncontrolled because they needed to bring more troops to the front. Pardon me. He now becomes a more reliable piece. Now, Hand of Gork is cast on a 7. If that spell is out, you now only need 5s. That's really, really quite good. It's not a guarantee. You can't really rely on magic, especially in an army that doesn't have intrinsic bonuses to cast. So you're really leaning hard on that Rora endless spell. But because it's relatively easy to cast, as a setup, it's so good. All right, so the Shaman, now we're gonna get to the other part that's really quite cool, and that's this thing right here. Now, again, unpainted, I just kind of got this a couple days ago. I'm gonna put it on the actual pedestal. This model, by the way, was way cooler than I thought it was. I don't even think it communicates well on the stream right now. When you physically get it and assemble it, if Ironjawz is your thing, this thing is just actually really, really neat. I enjoyed building it. It came out, it was just more impressive than I thought. The pictures didn't do it justice, I guess is where I'm getting at. So this is our terrain piece. This terrain piece expands yet again on the theme that the design team wanted for Ironjawz. It's another control piece. So in and of itself, the actual, I'm not going to go through all the how to man the tower, how to get off the tower. Let's just read the rules. This is aggressively bossy is what it's called. And this is once per turn in your hero phase. So it can only be done in your hero phase. Pick a visible enemy within 18 inches of this terrain feature to be the target. Effect. Roll a dice. Add 1 to the roll if this terrain piece features a shouty boss. This is basically any single infantry hero garrisoning the tower, okay? So on a 4+ or on a 3+, if it's actually garrisoned, pick one of the following effects to apply to the target until the start of your next turn. That's very, very important. So it lasts until your next turn. And the part where it gets really quite exciting is, oi, hold it, which is subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making a charge roll for the target to a minimum of 1. Wait, is that another source of charge control? Let's go back. Gaio, you don't need to get the actual war scroll on screen. I'm just going to be here. The Foot of Gork also subtracts 1. Now, does this effect subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled, making a charge rolls for the stomp units to a minimum of 1. Now, does that effect last until your next hero? This is once per turn your movement phase. That's when this gets to move. Remove the target from the battle, set this up in the battlefield. No. Then 3 inches 2+. It doesn't say whether this one lasts until the start of your next turn. Oh, it implies it. So it does 3 effects on a 2+. It inflicts an amount of mortal wounds equivalent to the roll. The unit has the stomped keyword until the start of your next turn. So to me, this implies it because things with the stomped keyword subtract 1 from their charge rolls. So now you got 2 effects that can just pin your opponent's turn. Why is this important? Well, let's get to the very nuanced part of AOS, which is mitigating priority rolls. So let's just assume for a sec you win priority and your opponent position themselves at a distance, but they're under those effects. You can actually freely give it away, understanding that they'll probably not be able to take advantage of it. And that's the beauty of this control. Now, yes, you do need to cast the spell. Yes, die rolls need to happen. But that's the game of AOS, and that's the lifestyle of a destruction player. But the odds are not terrible to execute, to get those things off. If you do, you are rewarded with an incredibly, dare I say, oppressive effect on your opponent's army. Varanguard going down to a 1 die and then having to pray to Slaanesh just to get the 2 dice is huge. Understanding that Varanguard can do that, guess what you can do? You can hit him with both effects, with the foot and the tower, and subtract 2 dice to a minimum of 1. So even if they pray to Slaanesh, they're still on 1 die. You could stack these effects. And that is absolutely cool, for lack of a better term. I'm really, really digging the control elements of the army, and one of the reasons why I'm so positive about them. Combine that with the War Scroll updates, I think Ironjawz, just regular Ironjawz, might be good. Even though the book is disappointing, at least the studio recognized that, made some adjustments before the book came out. And I think Ironjawz are still in a better spot, or at least if you like the control style. All right, so those are hopefully the last of the unpainted models you'll be looking at. Let's now talk, did I just say the last of the unpainted models? No, I built another model quite recently. This is all on my painting table currently right now, and that's this guy. And the Tusk Boss. Okay, so let's put him on the, I'm gonna put him on the actual turntable, Gaio. And now we get into heroes that nest within other heroes. One of which is the actual Tusk Boss itself. Now the Tusk Boss got nerfed a bit. And he went from hitting on 3s to hitting on 4s, which sucks. Why did they do that? I don't know. It couldn't have been because of the War Scroll update, because again, this book went to print or was written like 12 months ago. It is unfortunate that they actually made him objectively worse, but at least the ability to potentially have him as a prized beast, because he's a non-unique hero. He's not named, he's just a guy. So you could take Gordrakk, I think you could take a regular Maw-krusha too, and have him nested underneath him. And if you love the concept of this guy hitting on 3s, by the way, that bonus to hit, again, just to repeat, applies to all the companion attacks as well, which is massive. Because when these guys build up momentum, those tusks that now go from hitting on 4s to hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s at -2 rend, for every point of momentum that is on the actual big pig, he gets another bonus to attack. So if he has just a minimum of 1 momentum, those tusks hit at a flat 3 damage. At 2 momentum, flat 4 damage. So hitting on 3s is huge. The big deal of it is there's a lot of neg 1 to hit currently in the game right now. To have the option of going all out attack and still be hitting on 3s is big. You can really leverage the damage output of this guy. His actual rampage, which is head of the stampede, which adds another momentum to his score when he completes a charge. So the setup here, folks, I guess the tip would be to run to get 2 momentum. You go into the next following turn, you drop down to 1, you move, charge, get 1 momentum for charging, and then rampage, get another momentum. Now he's at 3 momentum, and with those tusks hitting on 3s, he can hit for a flat 5 damage. So if you are not leaning super heavy into Ardboys, this guy becomes an amazing choice to have as your nested hero within a regiment. Now, why am I saying that? I'm not saying no Ardboys, because Ardboys are absolutely excellent. It's just when you double down on Ardboys, you're going to most likely want an Ardboy Big Boss. And if you take an Ardboy Big Boss, you can't have him in your general's regiment he can't be nested in there. Why? Because you could only have this guy or that guy in that regiment. So it's a choice that you're going to have to make. Do you want a nasty beast that could potentially crank out a lot of damage? Or do you want the technical guy that supports your Ardboys to increase their damage? Do you want a fast mobile hammer? Or do you want to take your large horde and make them more prickly, more deadly? You can't do both. That's the downside. Can you nest that guy within another regiment? You could. It's just you're going to get into a situation where you're going to be squeezed for points. Once you start talking Kragnos and a Shaman, and then you're going to want to nest a hero, the Shaman can't receive any nested heroes. That's your limitation. So the only way you're going to put him the only way to nest a hero is going to be in that first regiment, the regiment that's led by Kragnos, or the regiment that's led by Gordrakk, or the regiment that's led by a regular mega boss on Maw-krusha. And although you can unlock a third regiment by spreading out points, you now go from a 2-drop to a 3-drop. And that's kind of harsh as an Ironjawz player. I think 2-drop is probably the most you're going to want to be at, unless, of course, you are not taking any big guys. If you forego all the Maw-krushas, both Gordrakk and a regular Maw-krusha, and don't even take Kragnos, you could go for a very hoardy list of a lot of Ardboys and maybe a big fat unit of brutes. And then you could be like a 3-drop and not care. Like if the guy goes, fine, you go first, you just move to the center because you're just sending in waves. At that point, maybe that becomes a good choice. It's not the style of play I necessarily want to do as just a regular Ironjawz list, but that's an option. Short story, I'll make a long story a bit shorter, is you're going to have a hard time getting both the Tusk boss and the Ardboy big boss in a list because points are just going to be tight. Everything's very, very pricey in Ironjawz, and it's going to be tight. Did I say that was the last unpainted model? I lied. All right, let's, I promise from this point it's going to be painted after this, okay? This is another guy I was terribly excited over, and this is my Ardboy big boss. Now, you'll notice the actual model itself is actually the Warhammer Plus model. Now, it was advertised as a mega boss, but for any of you that own the model, you well know that this guy's a little on the small side to be a mega boss. The actual current mega boss is quite a chunk heavier, bigger than this guy. So like he's such a cool model, and I just like, wow, you know what? I think I'm just gonna use him as my big boss instead, my Ardboy big boss. So I mounted him on a 40. He fits, as you could see. So he'll be on the things I absolutely are hitting my painting table. And this guy is your other choice for nested hero. Now, why this guy is so tremendously good, if you take 20 or 40 Ardboys, especially at 40 Ardboys, I think this guy becomes an automatic choice. He adds +1 to the shield bash from Ardboys, basically doubling the amount of mortal wounds you can inflict from a shield bash. He also helps with rallying. So if your unit is not in combat, you can add 3 to that roll, another 3 dice to the roll. So you start off with 6, get +1 for the banner, and then another 3. You're rolling 10 dice on 4s. You could bring back 2, maybe 3 Ardboys a turn with him included in that bubble. Like they have to be wholly within 12, but it is something he does. So he supports the whole Ardboy push, and I think he just becomes an excellent choice. He's the guy I've been taking with my Gordrakk list, and I just find him to be absolutely fantastic. So he makes most of my lists. Definitely a great choice. All right, so now we go into Ardboys. Now you see me mention Ardboys. Let me pull out some of my boys. There you go. I'll pull out the banner too. I think that guy looks pretty cool. And as you could tell, these are the older models, but I think they fit really, really well currently right now. They're still excellent. If you own the models, why not use them, especially if they're painted? Ardboy's got a huge improvement in this book. Mostly that the shield bash now happens at the beginning of the enemy combat phase. Sorry. So after they do their combat effects, you then get to do your shield bash. And you basically take every Ardboy within 3 inches of the enemy and roll a die for each one of those. And then on a 6, you inflict a mortal wound. Now, if you have that Ardboy big boss wholly within 12, it happens on a 5 or 6. So if you kind of group them right, you could have all 20 Ardboys triggering this effect. That's an average of basically 3 mortal wounds. With the big boss in range as well, you get 6 mortal wounds right off the bat. That is certainly not nothing. And if you get a fluky hit, you can actually crank out a heck of a lot more than that. So Ardboys are a base save of 3+, which is absolutely pretty incredible, as they're one of those 3+ armies. That 3+ that's just basically around the whole entire army. I knew it was going to be a big deal. You don't really realize how big of a deal until you actually start playing with the army. And they're so wound dense at 2 wounds a model that they just, with this improvement, these guys just become an automatic 20 in almost every single list for me. I love that they can scrum for the center. I love that the support they can get from the Ardboy Big Boss as well. I like that they're a setup unit. What I mean by that is the enemy crashes into them and they probably stick around, and then you come in with another unit to do a beta strike. So Ardboys are really, really good in my opinion. They compete, well, Brutes is where things can get dicey. My love affair of Brutes. All right, well, let's put Brutes down here on the table. Man, I've been back and forth on this unit for years. Now, on this table, and Gaio, you don't need to focus on the table. Trust me when I say this, there's 30 Brutes in various stages. This is the complete unit. I have another 20 Brutes that are like halfway done. I would love to use all 30, but they're just something about Brutes. I tell you, they have a 3+ save. You would think that because they have a 3+ save, these guys would be super durable, but they're just not. And the main reason is their points cost. 5 guys is 200 points. And although they hit hard, and they do, especially when they're hitting the target that they're meant to hit, because they have anti-infantry, they can have a Ren 2 flat damage. Now, they do hit on 4s and wound on 3s, but they have 3 attacks apiece. Now, if you have Gordrakk in your list, when he triggers it and you trigger it correct, they can have 4 attacks apiece. That's 41 attacks. So 40 attacks from the unit plus 1 for the actual champion. 41 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, at Ren 2 if you're going into infantry, at 2 flat damage. It's certainly not, like, it is so good. My issue is, of course, is that 4-inch move that did, yes, I understand, they did get a bit of improvement, a 2-inch bump, and it really does help them. But I just feel like I get more value out of Ardboys. Although they don't have the potential, the damage potential that that Brutes have, I just feel Ardboys for what you pay. So you get 20 Ardboys for 360 points. You get 10 Brutes for 400. Both have 3+ armor saves. The Ardboys have 40 wounds in the unit. The Brutes have 30 wounds, so 10 wounds less. 4 less. Now granted, they don't quite do the same amount of damage, but they do inflict mortals. Every point of mortal damage you do ignores all armor, pretty much no saves unless the guy has wards. Ardboys seem to be, yes, they might not do quite the same amount of damage, but they might do enough. Combine that with the other elements of your army, like say a Kragnos, or a Gordrakk, or Big Pigs, or a Tusk Boss. Maybe enough is just fine when they're supported by something else that can hit hard. And that's my issue I have with Brutes. I want to include them, and I have included them in lists. It's just they're just a little too fragile. The enemy recognizes that they do enough damage, and they can just kind of sneak in and clip them, and then you just pick them up. And they lose, if they lose 4 or 5 guys, the damage just drops like a stone. Whereas if you lose 4 or 5 guys from Ardboys. Let's just say 8 guys from Ardboys. The damage is still pretty darn good. Yeah, brutes I got mixed feelings. They do have a really cool rule in the form of umessin. And umessin is basically if they're on an objective and the enemy that has 1 or 2 wounds is also on the same objective, the enemy unit that has 1 or 2 wounds does not count anything for control. They just count as 0. Which sounds amazing, right? Until you actually look at the meta right now and look at the amount of cavalry that is in the game, or just big wound models that are in the game that these guys just don't interact with. Like it is a cool rule, but it definitely sounds cooler on paper than it does in game. So let me kind of bullet point through it. Like you're playing into Chaos Warriors. Chosen are 3 wound models. Umessin doesn't affect them. Varangard, 5 wound models. Umessin doesn't affect them. You're playing against Idoneth. Eels are everywhere. Umessin doesn't affect them. You're playing into other destruction armies. Ogres, doesn't affect them. Trolls, doesn't affect them. And you're like going, well, yeah, but what about zombies? You're right. Zombies, it would affect them. And they would probably rip through a unit of zombies. And then you'd get charged by the thing that matters, like Graveguard or the new Barrow Guard, or Barrow Guard. And then watch your Ironjawz brutes just get smashed into the ground. I got mixed feelings. If you have any comments, any success stories, love to hear them in the comments. I do like the models. Typically, I think the most you would take of brutes is a unit of 10. So I look at my other 2 units of 10 and I'm just like, I can't. There's no reason for me to actually finish you off. 10 is more than enough, I've found. If any of you out there are running more than 10 brutes in a game, let me know. I know there's some lists out there that use 20. Let me know what your success story is. I myself, I can't see myself taking more than 10. We'll go to another favorite unit of mine, and that is these beauties right over here. Brute Ragers. Now, I really, really like Brute Ragers. And I like how these came out. And one of the reasons why I love them is their running charge ability. I love the concept of them being a glass cannon, meaning their ability to just move across the battlefield, hit really, really hard, and then die. They're not so expensive that that's a crazy amount, a huge loss. What are they tilting the scales at? Let me see if I can look it up. I have some lists that use them. So a fully reinforced unit of Ragers, that's 6 models, is 240 points. Like, you're right, that's not so cheap that you wouldn't feel it, but let's put it in perspective. The 6 models have 18 attacks. If you all-out attack them, now you'd have to use an all-out attack here, they would hit on 3s, because all orcs, of course, hit on 4s. But unlike almost all the orcs, these guys wound on a 2+, and they have 1 rend and 2 flat damage. So you could have 18 attacks hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s at 1 rend, at 2 flat damage. And that is an awful lot of damage. They hit really, really hard. Love that they can run in charge. So this is a unit where you could go 4 inches, Mighty Destroyers 3, move another 4, and if you have Kragnos, 3d6 charge in, and just wail away on the other army. And the best defense at that point would be a great offense where the guy's not even standing to really swing back at you. You can do this with Gordrakk, right? Position with Gordrakk and get a +1 to that charge. So 4, 3, 4, and then get an extra +1 on the charge. Also, pretty darn good. But probably the coolest part about Ragers is They're a very interesting move that they can do because they can run and charge. If you position Rangers toward the center of the table and you're playing someone who loves seizing the center, you can move 3 as a Mighty Destroyer's move, redeploy, and because they can run and charge, countercharge in your opponent's turn to engage them, to deny that battle tactic. Now, you have to position very, very carefully when doing that. If it's a unit that is extremely fragile, you don't want to commit all the Rangers into combat because you will kill so many of that fragile unit that he'll just pull outside of 3 of you and still be able to complete his objective. So you're just going to want to nest within a ½ inch, put another guy an inch away, and just have hopefully only 2 models. Do not all-out attack. Let those 4+ be what they are, and then hopefully he does not pull out so many models that he's still engaged, thereby failing his battle tactic. So there is a lot to think about when doing that, but this is the only unit in Ironjawz that is able to interact at that level with that battle tactic, and I think a very, very cool option. You could take them as a little pocket-sized unit at 120 points. You could have them as 2 flankers. They're not very fast though, so you can't reliably perform the flank battle tactic. So it would have to be like a second round to do that. It is 240 points that you're dedicating to do that. So I kind of like these guys more as a rocket positioned toward the center, and then see what happens, so to speak. Charge in, maybe deny a battle tactic, definitely punish a unit that moves to the center of the battlefield, reach out and touch. All right, let's get into the Maw-grunta Hackin' Crew. Now, Gaio, that's going to be a slide, my friend. Hopefully you can actually see it. Let me look at my phone here. Let's look at the Hackin' Crew. All right, so the Hackin' Crew, we're looking at slide 13, my friend. All right, the Hackin' Crew. This is actually one of my favorite big pigs, and I actually, as you've gathered, I actually think all the big pigs are actually quite good. Again, this Maw-grunta could be nested underneath another hero, and you could get him to be prize beast as well. And the reason why I love him, he's a good amount of movement at 10 inches, a good amount of wounds at 12 wounds, good save at 3+, has a whole whack ton of different combat profiles. What is that, 4 profiles to be precise. Again, much like the Tusk boss, the momentum adds to his Tusk attack. So it could be as high as 5 flat damage on those Tusks. Again, if you make him a prize beast, he could be hitting on 3s. But the coolest part about him, what differentiates him from the Tusk boss, is the rampage. The Tusk boss, when it completes a charge, it can add another 1 momentum. Their passive rampage, or sorry, their passive effect, I apologize, is this. Their passive effect is really, really cool. Each time this unit uses a charge ability, it gains 1 momentum. All right, so that's cool. Sorry, it's Carve a Path. I apologize. Sorry, it's Carve a Path. It is a rampage. If this unit is in combat, so you have to charge in and then click over to the next round, that's when that rampage checks. If you are in combat, you are able to do, on a 2+, do mortal wounds, and then leave combat and reposition, right? Reposition and gain 2 momentum. This is really, really quite good. So picture this, you charge in with the actual Maw-grunta with Hackin' Crew, and let's just say that you ran last turn, then you dropped 1. So basically at the end of that turn, you were at 2 momentum. This turn, you're now at 1 momentum. Well, because you're still in combat, you can leave, gain 2, so now you're back up to 3, and then charge again. Not bad. I like the little bit of movement as well. You can leave combat, charge something else, which is also very, very good. So this guy adds a really neat mobility option, but there is a catch. The catch is he does have to survive 1 round of combat at least to be able to disengage. Because again, that rampage only works if at the beginning of your movement phase, he's engaged. If he's engaged, he can leave. What makes him also super sweet is he's hard to tag. So your opponent goes, tags him to try to deny his movement, and then it goes to your turn, and then during your turn, your movement phase, you leave combat with Carve the Path, inflict mortals, gain momentum, and then charge something else. I like the technical play of the Hack and Crew. Obviously, the models are super, super cool. Love the fact that actual big pigs in general are much, much better. Speaking of big pigs, let's go to one of my favorites, which is the Gouger. So the Gouger, let's go to the actual turntable. These are some of the models that I painted for my army kind of recently. Obviously, these models are relatively new. And the reason why I love this model is, well, first off, it has the same profile, more or less, as the other big pigs. So movement 10, 12 wounds. I am not sure why, but the Gouger does have a worse save. Why? I don't know. It would be crazy if they had a 3+ save. Would it? I mean, you didn't do that for the other 3+ save armies, right? I mean, it's the Stormcast are a 3+ save army. Pretty much everything in their army is a 3+ save. That doesn't break the universe. I don't get it. But the Gouger awkwardly has a 4+ save, and you're just gonna have to remember that, especially at the beginning when you're so used to everything having a 3+ save. Like I'm in a little window right now, but I get why Ragers who are bare-chested have a 5+ save. They're bare-chested. This guy's as armored as anything else with a 3+ save in the army, and it has a worse save. All right, so in any case, why do I like the Gougers? It is their actual rampage called Flatten in the Mud. Flatten into the Mud triggers on a 5+, and when you roll a 5+, that enemy unit that it is engaged with gains the strike last effect. Now, what's super cool about the Gouger is the momentum that the pig generates throughout the game adds to that roll. So if you're at least on 2 momentum, you could trigger that on a 3+. On 3 momentum, very obviously, almost automatic, you're on a 2+ to trigger strike last. And this is yet another example or another dimension to the control game that Ironjawz have. And I just love that part. Strike last is an incredible effect. So much better than strike first. When you make a unit strike last and that unit is engaged with multiple Ironjawz units and they strike last, you get to go through all your units first before they get to lift a sword. And that is just so, so good. I love Gougers. I've been taking them. I have 2 in my army. Here, let me put the other one down on the table. You'll notice that I mix various armor to kind of make them a little bit different. I take 2 in the army in some of my lists to perform flanks. It is pricey. It's a lot of points to the side, but because they move 10 inches, I feel that they could get back into the game relatively quickly. So I use them to perform flanks. I also use a single to just support my army in general, to add that cool tech to the army. yeah, I just love gougers, and they're absolutely fantastic. All right, so now let's get to the units which I'm not terribly excited over. And Gaio, we need to get to the Weird Brute Rekkas. The Weird Brute Rekkas, I'm not saying these guys suck. They're 100 points. At 100 points, that is like the cheapest unit or Ironjawz unit you could buy for your army. They also have a 5-up ward. And they have a lot of attacks at 6 attacks a guy. And they can trigger, if I'm not mistaken. Do they trigger? No mortals. I thought they had mortals. That would have made them amazing. I guess that would be a little too crazy. They can also run in charge. At 6 attacks, 1 rend, 1 damage. They do have anti-infantry, so they can get up to 2 rend against the right target with those hordes and hordes of attacks. So 6 of them have 36 attacks at potentially 2 rend, 1 damage. 2 units of them split into 2 min units of 3. You could set up for a flanks battle tactic without tying up many points. And because they can run in charge, they can maybe get back into the game relatively easy. I have a buddy who's a big fan of these guys. I haven't quite decided whether I want them in my list. They do have value at 100 points though, so I don't think they're bad. So far they haven't been for me. And because points are hard to come by in Ironjawz, even 100 points, even at 100 points, I struggle to fit them in. Do you find them super useful? Let me know. All right, as we get into the next unit, if you haven't done so already, we'd super appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and flashing the thumbs up. We are a brand new channel. We've only been doing this for roughly about 6 months, and we'd like to continue doing it, but we're trying to close in on 1,000 subscribers, and we can only do that with your support. Let's get into my next unit, and again, these were now units that I'm having struggling finding roles, or maybe that are not as ideal. And let's go with this guy. All right, boom. This is a Gore-grunta. Now this Gore-grunta is converted. It is not a standard model. I took a unit from the Underworld's warband, and back when I used to play Ironjawz, they used to have a thing called bosses, and bosses were like mini characters. They weren't full-blown heroes, but they were heroes within like their version of regiments at the time that got an extra wound. Anyway, it was super cool. Wish they had brought that back. That was really, really neat. In any case, I did the model. I think it looks pretty darn cool. But what's not cool is how my poor Gore-gruntas have been treated this edition. I have, what do I have? What is this? 6, 12, 18, 21 Gore-gruntas fully painted. And at most, you'll see maybe when you're playing me 6, usually has 2 units of 3. This is one of the good units to perform the battle tactic flanks. They do have anti-cav, and that's all right. But unlike most of the cavalry in this game, the cav feel rather limp-wristed. They don't do a lot of damage, as most cav unlock extra damage when they charge. These guys do not. So the rider himself has anti-cav rend 1, obviously, an extra rend. It has a native rend, so it can be at rend 2 against cav. But the tragedy is the actual grunta itself is the one that unlocks extra damage. And the reason why it's tragic is it is a companion weapon, which means you can't make it any better. And what makes it super tragic is they decided in this book to shift it from hitting on 4s, which was already kind of dicey to begin with, to now hitting on 5s. Ugh. They do wound on 2s, but hitting on 5s just really made this unit that was already struggling to get onto the battlefield, make it that much harder. Now, the rider did get an extra attack and now has 4 attacks. So each pig has 8. That's not nothing. And there is a trick you could definitely do with them. You could take 6 all in one unit, put that 6 underneath your general's regiment, and give them, well, let's just say you're playing against an army that has a lot of infantry. You could give them anti-infantry. And then now you have 6 pig riders that are now Ren 2. That ain't bad. And they move 9 inches. So you can move 9. Mighty Destroyers 3. Then move 9 again. And then charge. Kragnos 3d6. Gordrakk +1 to the charge. And also extra attack. To which Gore-grunta's companion attacks. They do get an extra attack, but the companions do not get the extra attack. What Gordrakk provides is the extra +1 to hit. So Gordrakk would give them +1 to hit. The rider would be hitting on 3s, and the pigs would be back to hitting on 4s. Is that enough to take 6 of them? Probably not. Main reason why is at their points cost, they directly compete with Ardboys. And although Ardboys are not as fast as Gore-gruntas, they're a pool of 40 wounds as opposed to, 20 Ardboys are a pool of 40 wounds. 6 Gore-gruntas again, 30. They can dish out mortals. They can dish out D3 mortals, maybe, because there's a 33% chance they don't even do that. They got a Gore-grunta charge that on a 2+ on a, basically the bad D3, they get to do D3 mortal wounds. Not from each pig, just 1 D3. Whereas you could potentially get 20 shield bashes that you could engineer to 5+. And yes, we're not talking more points, but why wouldn't you? It's just so good. So the taking 6 or a lot of pigs, just generally speaking, is I think a thing of the past. I have been actually using 6 pigs under a general regiment and trying to use that whole anti-infantry or anti-monster for my, and it does elevate them. The actual rider going to a Ren 2 is pretty good. And then when you're going into regular Cav is very popular in the game, right? Varangard, Seraphon Cav, Lumineth love taking Cav, Soulblight love taking Cav, generally speaking, not always though. Idenith are coming out, they're Cav. So Gore-grunta's maybe not dead. I don't know. It's going to require a lot of testing on my part, but there it is. All right, so we only got a few more actual War Scrolls to go. Let's hammer through this. We got Zogrok, Anvil Smasher. Now, that's going to be a slide, Gaio. So if you get him on the screen for me, the Zogrok Anvil Smasher, this guy, initially when I was testing, I wasn't testing with Kragnos. And this guy made every single one of my lists because he acts as a damage buffer. Basically, he picks a unit and then he goes Power of the Great Green God, and on a 4+, that unit gains crit mortal wounds. So on 6s, they can do mortal wounds. Obviously, if you have more attacks, better odds of triggering those 6s. And again, Ardboys, lots and lots of attacks, are a great chassis for that. So if you love Ardboy, Zogrot becomes a natural choice as well. Maybe if you're going a more intense infantry kind of build. Zogrot does have his own army of Renown, which we'll touch on, which I think is actually pretty cool. He's all right, but as soon as I'm starting now to use Kragnos more frequently, or now Gordrakk, again, points become harder. and things become tighter to squeeze. And I just find that Gordrakk doesn't make the team. He's good, but not good enough to make most of my lists. This is true of the next War Scroll. So let me put it up on the pedestal here. There you go. I got 3 War Chanters, baby. At one point, War Chanters were the bee's knees, and that's why I have 3 of them. War Chanters, this edition, or with the release of this book, are objectively worse. The thing that you really wanted to do with them is add that additional damage, and the book increased the chant roll. It went from chanting on 4 to chanting on 5. That, I can't say this enough, that one shift up, I think pretty much laid them to rest. The fact that War Chanters also have an opportunity cost that you have to do an extra drop, with the fact that that prayer is way harder to pull off now, I think pretty much kills them for me. If I'm going to go 2 drops, I'm taking one of the big boys and a shaman. This guy does not make the team. I went from not taking any shamans and always taking a War Chanter to not taking the War Chanter at all. He is not a nested hero. If he was, he would be actually useful. I would consider having him in a list. But the fact that he's a drop and the fact that the kilobeat is much harder to pull off just makes him objectively worse. He can get a bit of help with the endless spell Roar. That's this guy right here with the skull with the cloud. And although that is cool, he can't himself cast that endless spell or manifestation. You need a shaman to do so. So what are you going to do? You're going to take Kragnos, a shaman, and this guy to have one guy cast the endless spell, then have the other guy get a bonus? I guess. But now you're at 3 drops, and that's an opportunity cost that I don't want. Plain and simple, War Chanter, I'm not going to say it's completely dead for me, but in a vast majority of my lists, he no longer makes the cut. Which is a shame, because I really love the War Chanter model. I think he's really, really cool. I like the fact that he's a priest. Priests are cool. All right, and now for the greatest disappointment, we go to the Mega Boss on foot. I struggle to think of a list where I would take this guy. He was hard to take before, but at least there were universes where you would take him, because he had an ability to go, hey brutes, you get +1 attack. And if I jump through this ring of fire and my star is in the house of Aquarius, you can maybe get another attack. And then on Waaagh, get another attack. Well, they took that ability away. What I mean by that is he no longer looks at a unit and goes, hey, brutes, you get an extra attack. He has to jump through those rings of fire and align the stars to be able to squeeze out that attack. Although Waaagh's still on the table, I don't need this guy to activate Waaagh. I can use one of my big boys to do so. Kragnos can do it for me. That guy is freaking terrible. I don't understand why you would ever take him. If one of you out there can think of a really cool idea why you'd want to take him, I'd love to hear it. I would, even if I was playing an all-infantry list, I would take an Ardboy Big Boss over this guy. All right. Boom. So there it is. That is all the War Scrolls and my opinions on them. We do have one more thing to go over, and that is the actual, my favorite army of Renown, which is the Zograt's Anvil Smashers, I believe is what they're called. Now, oh, sorry, Zogrock's Ironmongers, I apologize. Ironmongers. I like this list, but the problem with all these armies of Renown is you don't get the Waaagh. So you have to leave that on the table. So no bonus to charge, no bonus attack. That can happen every round. So you leave that on the table. You don't get the terrain piece either. And this terrain piece is super, super cool. You don't get the actual manifestation. Sorry. You do get the most important one, which is the Gordrakk Role. That is pretty awesome, but you don't get Foot of Gork, which could subtract a die. You don't get the Spit Pond that can subtract from OC or objective control. That's a nice big piece. So you just get that manifestation, or you pick one of the universal ones. I'm not going to break through all of it. There's so many. This has already been previewed to death. I think Gaio even has it on the screen right now. Gaio, you can flick through it. But I like Zogrock's Ironmongers. We'll go to the first slide, Gaio, and that is the Legendary Vandals is actually quite cool. When you're playing the Sylvaneth and all of a sudden your whole entire army gets an extra rend versus terrain, that's kind of funny. But barring that, getting anti-faction terrain is really corner case to the point of almost being inconsequential. They also get anti-war machine. I don't know why that would even be remotely a thing. I am pretty sure your army has no problem deleting any war machine they have to get to grips with. But I guess if you get to grips and you get an extra rend, that's not why you're taking this. The big deal is the Shield of Scrap and Muscle. The Shield of Scrap and Muscle is the big deal. While friendly Zogrock Anvil Smasher is within combat range of a friendly Ardboy's unit, so within 3 inches of a friendly Ardboy's unit, it could be multiple units, it could be smack dab in the middle of it, Zogrock Anvil Smasher has a ward save of 4+. Each time you make successful ward save roll for Zogrock Anvil, allocate 1 damage to the Ardboy unit within its combat range, and the damage sequence ends. Sorry, we're not done yet. The secret sauce, I apologize, is actually called the Ironclad Scrums, where friendly Zogrock Ironmongers Ardboy units within 3 or more models have a 5+ ward save while they're wholly within wholly within 12 inches of a different friendly Zogrock Ironmongers unit with 3 or more models. So basically, what does all that mean? Is that you could take 2 Ardboy units, have them beside each other, and they give each other a 5+ ward. Man, that is pretty dang exciting. You don't get any big pigs though, so you lose out on that tech as well. You're also restricted on your roster of your options, which is basically Zogrock, any Ironjawz infantry hero, any non-hero Ironjawz infantry units. So you're really quite severely capped. It's basically Zogrock in a ocean of Ardboys. That just sounds freaking cool. You encounter an objective or a mission or battle plan that has 6 objectives. I think you're going to have a real hard time pulling that off. But the vision of seeing potentially 60, maybe 80 Ardboys rocking across the field is really, really cool. And 40 wounds with a 3+ armor save with a 5+ ward save is incredibly durable. Is it a bit of a meme list? Yeah, I think it is. You don't hear me talking about Big Waaagh. I'm not a big fan of it. Everything I've seen so far or experienced, they're awkward. Like, I like the fact that you have recursion, but I would just rather have regular Ironjawz. I'd rather have the tower. I'd rather have access to all my manifestation lures. I'd rather have access. You have unrestricted access, by the way, sorry, 4 units in Big Waaagh. The problem is for every Ironjawz hero, you have to take a Kruleboy hero. So you run out of what you do, and the army doesn't look at each other. So, like, for instance, the Kruleboy heroes don't really help the Ironjawz heroes. So everything's kind of siloed. Nothing's really maxed. You're not the full control style army that a pure Ironjawz army would be. And that is, I think, the issue I have with it. I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan at all of Big Waaagh. It doesn't really crank my style. It's certainly not as compelling as Zogrot. I think that's just fun. Running that many Ardboys running across the table, I think is just an absolute hoot. All right. With that all in mind, I think we've hit our end of our stream. What do you all think of the actual book? I think we still have an extraordinary amount of play. I am actually still genuinely excited. I like to thank the design team for doing that War Scroll update and helping out an army that needed it. Because honestly, the prize beast and the extra 2 inches of movement really does help the army quite a bit. I also want to send criticism. Matt Rose, my friend, you've done a lot of great things, and I don't want to take away from that. I think your overall impact on the game has been more positive than negative. But this book, and just being a rehash of an index with only basically a piece of terrain and endless spells being the only really significant changes and everything else being worse, is tragic. In a lot of ways, the book is a failure. You definitely get an F on the actual book itself. But I do appreciate the fact that you did recognize what was coming. And I'm sure you were like going, oh God, when this book hits, I'm gonna get so much flack for this. And you recognize that you're gonna modify and help out. And I do appreciate that. But oh man, I hope no one else gets a book like this. All right, so long story short, folks, I think we're done. Hit me up in the comments if you have any questions. I'll be posting some lists maybe in the actual comments of things that I enjoy doing. Some example lists of what I've been experimenting with. So you'll be able to check that down below. And with that, I'd like to say a good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world. And I guess we'll see you next week.